Just double checked to make sure that everything is good. And then Instagram in particular. Well, maybe I'd the Instagram. Instagram is sometimes
I
fickle
hope
about.
my chair doesn't squeak too much.
I
Am
didn't
I?
know that you guys were also on Instagram.
Oh, it's
Mm.
working.
Oh,
Gagigi
nice,
Instagram
nice.
look again.
We are live.
Again and
Buenas,
again.
buenas, and half a day
Biba biba. All
from the
right.
village of Talofofo.
Again, eight
Morning
matsotso.
boots.
Westing. All right.
Certified.
Hey, buenas, buenas. San half a day todos hamzu buena hudzung. Estige si Michael Luhan Bavakwa. Ungan. Estige un nuevo na episode Fanatsu. Hungan. But Tiguao Hagwini Pago, I am so glad I am not Han Solo Malolo para este na episode Fanatsu. We have a very special, and I know sometimes I say that this is a special episode of Fanatsu, and I'm just trying to hype myself up because it's just me talking to myself about vinyl records or something like that. But Gimenagahit especial este episode Pagus Sahafa. We have two wonderful guests who will be introducing a special series that they have, a quarterly series of Fanatsu episodes that they are going to be launching soon. This is their introductory episode in solidarity. Maria Hernandez and Teihini Davis will be talking about it. But before we get into this, I want to take everyone back a little bit because, of course, I'm a middle-aged Chamorro man with a very large beard. So I like to take everyone back and say, Maila fan matatsong famaguan. Let's listen to a story about the before times, not World War II times, but the before times. No, no. Fanatsu is 9 years old. Next year is the 10-year anniversary for Fanatsu. And so Fanatsu is a Chamorro-focused podcast. It has always been. It was started by Manny Cruz. He is the godfather of Fanatsu. He is our Ninu. And he started this as part of the media committee for independent Guahan as a chance to talk about decolonial issues, to kind of reach people in a different way, to get past kind of the media filter around issues of social justice, around colonization, around that activists sometimes encounter when they're trying to connect with the community and use the traditional forms of media. And even though we've always been Chamorro focused, Fanatsu has always been a space where we recognize that our struggle is connected to other struggles in the Marianas, in Micronesia, in the Pacific, and elsewhere in the world. And so we have always worked to have a space for solidarity conversations, solidarity connections, and and then bring in voices from Okinawa, from other islands in the Marianas, from other Micronesian islands, from Hawaii, from movements for decolonization and demilitarization elsewhere in the world. And this is one of the reasons why I think of Fanatsu as just this sort of thing where I sort of put some, I go to mobile, I use my mobile points card and I fill up, I get some gas, I start up the bush cutter, and then my Zoom app goes on. And then I have a Fanatsu episode, and I think, oh, some people watch the episode, and then some people, and then my Pari just says, "Hey, that was a good episode, Pari. I didn't really watch it, but I turned it on and I liked it, and so hopefully it was good." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess it's good. I guess." And then I always, and so you never know, is it having an impact? But sometimes when I travel and I talk to other people around, like in other communities, I'm always surprised when they say, "Oh, I don't know much about what's happening in this part of the Pacific, in this part of the world." But sometimes all that they know comes from the Fanatsu podcast because
Mm.
they get their news from podcasting, they get their events from podcasting, they connect through podcasting. And so sometimes as they're looking, they'll find something on, oh, environmental justice, contamination, and there'll be an episode where somebody from a group in Guam was talking about a certain issue, and then they go deep dive and they learn about our issues. And that's the only thing that they've ever learned from media about our part of the world is by listening into a Fanatsu episode. And so I'm always amazed at that. And so these solidarity conversations are so important because sometimes when I travel to the Virgin Island, when I've talked to people from the Virgin Islands, sometimes Fanatsu is the only link that people in the
Wow.
Virgin Islands, people in Guam, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, these are our other US territories. And then sometimes the most regular conversations that people have learning about each other come from this podcast because we've always made it a goal to connect to those movements that we feel are similar to our own. And so that's why I'm so excited that Maria and Teihini here have kind of decided to formalize this and make it a quarterly, every 3 months or so, they want to bring out In Solidarity, connecting to movements for decolonization, demilitarization, environmental justice, and other movements from the community, from people, that are similar to our own that we need to hear about, connect to the people that are doing that work. And so, si Zeus Masi Perifanaton Mizu, Maria and Teihini, para este episode Fanatsu, I'm so very excited that both of you have agreed to take up this work.
Titus Maasi Maget. Oh, I love
Sana
hearing
maasi, Chalu. What an intro. I
what
have no words, but in the best way. That was beautiful. Marie, did you want to go first? I have my main is going pew 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 in a beautiful
Oh,
way, but
Hungen.
I
Oh
want
no.
to.
Oh, si Zeus
Can you
Oh,
guys
go
hear me?
ahead. But I'm gonna hand it off to you now. But yes, por favor, introduce in Maisa Hamza. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and then introduce, I'm gonna hand it esto comentos Omega. I've already talked a bunch. Hungen, go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool,
Guys,
cool,
says.
cool. Half a day, everyone. Titus Maasi Maget. This is amazing. Fanatsu, we always say Fanatsu is special, right? But, you know, it's just another opportunity like every episode is another opportunity to kind of share information about things that are happening and connecting with so many different people in the movement. So yeah, I can say like 100% absolutely. Solidarity episodes are very, very special. And so we're so excited to be here today. Inanhusi Maria Hernandez May, Tao Tao Tamuningzu, born and raised here in the beautiful island of Guahan in the Mariana Islands. And I've been on Fanatsu a couple times. I've been a community organizer for a little over a decade now, and actually met Hini, I would say 2017-ish, because I first remember Hini testifying at the Guam legislature against the firing range complex, and Hini was only a high school. I think you were in a senior. You were a senior at the time, and so just seeing these passionate high school students. I think I was in my mid-20s, and you know, they were having us, the Ratidian families, I that's kind of how I got into organizing, standing on the shoulders of my matriarchs in my family who have been fighting the good fight for land return, ancestral land return for more than 60 years now. And I was raised going to protests. I was raised hopping locked fences, going to camp out, going to our family's ancestral land for sit-in campouts, and that was my childhood. And so just thinking back on that experience, that was my sort of my introduction into politics as a child. And then in 2014, for those who, because a lot of people from Fanatsu or who listen to Fanatsu, live out in Turtle Island, you might not be in Guam to know all of the details around the projects, military projects in particular, that are harming our lands and waters. So specifically the firing range complex, it's a 700 firing range complex in northern Guahan. It's 5 ranges in total, and they are proposing to shoot 7 million lead bullets per year above our island's main water source. The buffer zone for the range extends about 3 miles out into the ocean. And so it's a really critical time to just continue to raise awareness about efforts to put a stop to the project, because there are so many different impacts. And I love that that's how me and Heaney kind of were introduced to each other through that movement. And so before I share a little bit more about what we're thinking for In Solidarity, I'll just go ahead and pass the mic to my sis, Heaney Davis, who I'm so happy we've stayed connected over the years. And when Heaney moved home, or even when she was off island and we stayed connected, we were thinking back on a conversation we had about us doing something big together. We don't know what yet. And so just to connect again and be like, I think this is it. I think this is it. We're gonna do this podcast together. So yeah, really excited to introduce Heaney. Go ahead, sis. How did you get into how did you learn about the firing range complex? What brought you to that legislature table?
Honestly, Maria, thank you. First of all, that was a beautiful introduction as well. Everything you said highly resonate. It was with you, my heart, and everything you said, the energy was very, very necessary for that because I was thinking about how to kind of segue into how I got into it. And I think, on the topic of what we were talking about earlier with Miguel of like things happening organically. And I think I'm a firm believer that one of the best things or some of the best things in life that you can experience with these kinds of people that we do this work in community with happens when you least expect it. And a lot of times when it happens like that and you're not planning it, years down the road, it's almost like, hey, do you remember how we became friends? Like, it's one of those things where it's just, oh, we've always been friends. It's natural, of course. So, in that same aspect, I think that's how I'm kind of recalling my time and my introduction to the movement with the Lick and the firing range when I was in high school. And to be honest, it wasn't that long ago. I know I'm still nanny, but a lot of my high school years were a blur. I'm gonna be honest. I do not remember a lot of it except for like core memories, key memories, and stuff like that. Because I think, when you're in that go-go mindset of studying and your short-term memory is just plus. But I do. I honestly do not remember how I ended up in that courtroom. And and that's like in the best way that I can say honestly from my heart. I think it was meant to be there. And like I don't mind not remembering the details of who asked me to be there and how I ended up being there because it truly just happened organically. I remember hearing of you because they were asking, the students who were there that day or who couldn't be there, would you like to support the families? They're making t-shirts for, to support the movement and to get more awareness about it. And I remember hearing, I'm like, get me 20 right now. I didn't have 20 t-shirt monies, but I had the spirit. I was like, I want to support this family. I never met them, but I feel at such a young age this passion already and this connection that, is very foreshadowing in a good way to like the work that we're doing now and how our paths have crossed. So yeah, I just remember like, oh, just give me the money. I'm gonna give it to Maria. I'm like, Artiste Maria. Who's this? I never met Maria. I don't know the face to the name, but I just kept hearing, oh, she's a part of the families that owns, that land that is a part of this. This is why we're here, and this is the connection that we have. And so that is kind of my side of the story or perspective of like hearing of Maria Hernandez. I'm like, this mysterious girl. She's, and I kept hearing good things about this Magahaga, and I'm like, I needed to see the face to the name. And then, when I went to the States and we connected um around 2020 during the COVID lockdown and everybody had that time to just really go inward, we found, leading into the solidarity movement, that unity in being in quarantine and feeling that. And as Chamorro people who are built on community, this being separated and locked down for that long was not natural to us, and we needed other ways to connect. And even though I was out in the States and you were here in Guam, Chelu, like we found ways to kind of bring that full circle and meet each other where we were at. And we just kept in touch until I came back home last year in July. And around that time was when we kind of revisited what Maria was saying about how we just feel like we've been brought together, our paths have crossed for a reason. And we didn't know what it was in the beginning, but we felt it. And I think a part of the proof and the evidence of that coming into fruition is like this In Solidarity podcast and the opportunity to be in Fanatsu. And this is my first Fanatsu episode, so Viva, cheers to that. And
Cheers.
just kind of so grateful that I get to be in these spaces and with people that I've heard of growing up, and I finally get to be alongside them. It's a dream come true, and it's a little intimidating, not gonna lie, but in a way that makes me want to continue to come around and be better and show up. And I want to use that this podcast series to kind of reflect that intention of connecting to people that are just like us, that have stories that sound just like ours, where we don't know exactly how to start or where to start, but we have that passion and we are passionate about being in community with our people who make us feel less alone in this world with everything that is going on, and we need more of that. And so, yeah, Sana Maasi for that. That is kind of my introduction to like my relationship to Cheta Maria and the firing range in the Texan, and speaking on behalf of the people everywhere on this planet that feel exactly what this is, about, without having to be in it, but hearing from people like you who are actually in it and having that opportunity to hear your voice.
Ay, de San Bonito y Sinangan Minzu. That's yeah, see why am I even here? See, maulag niya hamso na dos. See, esta. My
For the
God.
vibes, B, and
I'm just my
Vibes
facilitation
to the
my
vibes.
beard,
support.
my beard just takes up a lot of space. That's the only reason that I'm here. But one of the things that Hugo Fagradesi por esta conversación, and then even just the way that both of you have introduced yourself here is, Maria, one of the things that you have always emphasized, your family has always emphasized, and that I've always appreciated is the necessity for activism and movements to be intergenerational. Because there is, for many people, sort of, this feeling like the cause kind of grabs you, you do it, and then kind of you fade away, you disappear. But the thing though is that as we see, the something may happen, people may feel caught up in it, and then doesn't mean that it goes away. Even if you may have won in the moment, the forces that you won against, they may have evolved. They may have just gone into hiding for a little while. Maybe they gave the land to somebody else or something like that, and it's still there. Like who knows? Maybe they hid the toxic chemicals somewhere else. Who knows? But the point though is that the next generation needs to know what's happening. But I think for a lot of people, there's this feeling like we fight now. We fight in the moment. and then and then we're done. Makpo mananzanesta. But what I've always appreciated about you and your family is to emphasize the intergenerational nature of activism and movements, that you have to be passing on the stories, that you have to be telling people what has happened in the past. You have to be preparing the next generation. And then Tahini, then to you, talking about that too, being inspired but part of it too is also then being very upfront about where you have come from as well. That people come to activism from places where sometimes maybe you had signers who told you this is why we protest. This is our destiny. This is what we do. And maybe you end up in a place and you're like, Lanya Taimanu Zuguini, how did I end up here? I don't know, but I feel inspired and I gotta figure out how I ended up here. I gotta come back to this. But that's real.
Hmm.
That's real. And that's real human. That's the reality of it. And so I loved the truth that you shared there, because sometimes we get caught up in sort of the vision of activists, like the activist that knows everything, that's got it all together. But it's important to remember that some people were born into movements, but other people feel like they're just caught up in it because of circumstances, because of passion, or maybe even an accident. Maybe, like you said, who's that mega hog over there? Man, she's cool.
Yes. Fate.
Yeah,
Tomorrow fate.
something like that. And so I appreciate, I just appreciated that as kind of grounding this conversation, grounding sort of where this conversation between the two of you will come from, especially because I know that Maria, you were mentioning like briefly my virtual background, which of course is one of the protests in the 90s at Potts Junction. One of the many protests and direct action uh, forms of direct action at that time, where landowners, all sorts of Nashon Chamorro members, the Chamorro Tsetlus for independence, they were they were fighting for their land rights, and they were getting blocked by the military and stuff like that. And so, your family, and then the Artero family, and then other families have told so many stories about sort of the activism around getting access, getting justice for landowners. And so but it's important, because if we don't, if we don't talk about sort of and share an image like this, like people won't know, what this means. It's like those memes where somebody's going to say, "Oh, I'm going to tell my kids this is Black Friday sale." Or I'm going to tell my kids this is Black Friday sale at Dededo Flea Market.
I'm gonna tell my kids that's the line at DMV.
But so that's no, but that's
Yeah.
why the telling those
Was
stories
up
and
at the
passing on.
exhibit. I remember this one. Was this a part of the SKC photo frames? The article collages?
Oh no, not this one. This one was actually included in an exhibit at the museum before the pandemic.
Oh,
They
okay.
actually had it in an exhibit here at the museum, like quite a few years ago.
Oh,
But
I love seeing old photos like this. Still, every now and then, a new one will pop up, and I still remember when we MCCA, Hitzel Texan, and Independent Guahan, a bunch of orgs were able to showcase some artwork and collages in an exhibit last year on indigenous land rights. And we had some elders walk in, some, with Nashon Chamorro, the Ritidian families. One of the featured artists, their family has a history of advocacy and activism around the Harmon Cliff line. It's just a really powerful, beautiful gathering of people. And just to see the elders look at the photo collages, they were taken aback. Um, I was able to create a installation of my great grandfather's living room, so it had a lot of old photos from just back in the day, like our family living at La Texan, And so yeah, just to see people being taken aback by these photos, it kind of, yeah, it helps with that oral tradition, because there are generations of people coming in and um experiencing all of the artwork and all of the photos. So yeah, just with activism around Heaney and I, like, we've been pretty active in movement spaces together. I think when thinking about co-host, every time Heaney and I get together, we're just giggling nonstop, and we're like, at the very least, it'll just be 1 hour of giggling, which is which is therapeutic.
Productive giggling. Productive. It's synergetic, communal. It's for the people. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and so I think like that kind of segues into what we were thinking for the podcast episode was is kind of like, or the podcast series was looking at different grounded perspectives of community care, specifically in organizing spaces, and sort of demystifying activism and what an activist is. You know, it's not like, protests are definitely needed and so important and critical, but you know, it's also the small everyday acts of love that ripple outward that is activism to us. So yeah, we did want to acknowledge, and I think we have been in the last, just in the last 30 minutes, acknowledging those that came before us, ancestors. So in the episodes coming up, you know, we will be doing a grounding, you know, honoring ancestors. We wouldn't be here without those that paved the way for us. And so yeah, we kind of wanted to talk about individually, like, what activism can look like. You know, it can look like speaking your language. You know, there's a whole movement right now. Miguet's been part of that for, was it 2 decades now, Miguet, that you've been teaching Chamorro to the community. My kids are in Harao, so shout out to all the Mempipeksai, Sina and Marie. Miguet's nanny Lulai, I saw her this morning being carried by the carried by
Oh,
the
ayun.
principal.
Yeah, mapo
Uh,
desti la para si Lulay hunggan. It's hard for
Lulay.
Malago Domingo si Nana does not want to leave the Itano Nana, does not want to leave the world of Nana.
Yeah, so don't worry. She was being carried by the principal there, so she's in good hands over there. But yeah, it could just be like, you know, getting your kids in a school to speak the language, dance, music, art. Heaney is an amazing singer. If anybody went to the Nalotla concert, girl, oh my gosh. Everything, I was like speechless. I was like, that's my friend. Um, so proud of you, sis. Like, I know that that's activism in your own way that you can probably expound
For
upon.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you pretty much hit the I have a hard forgive me. I have a hard time of sayings. I get the hammer and the nail and the nail on the head mixed up. So, but you hit that you with all your points. And like just to reiterate what you were saying, like we we couldn't have done and bringing in what Miguel has talked about too, of like the intergenerational impact and influence and setting that example. Like it doesn't have to stop just because your great 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 grandmother did this or that and that was her time. Her time is just as important as our time. Her time had to happen, his time had to happen. Nana thought that for ours. So when we talk about like ancestors, I imagine and I want to put it out there to remind our people that it's not just ancient ancestors, but even our ancestors that have passed on recently, our great grandmothers are from just the recent wars, recent times, not so far back. Because I know sometimes too, I have to decolonize my own mindset sometimes and like ask myself, why am I only thinking about like primitive ancient days? Why am I not thinking about just maybe 50 years ago, 30 years ago, and who was doing something in the 90s, in the 80s, the Angit Santos, like those movements that were not that long ago. They are also the ancestors that we honor just by being in these spaces, doing it our own way, even if it doesn't look like going out there and protesting, jumping the fence. Yes, that is just as much necessary and gets our point across as, going over to, say, your prima's house or your Molly's house, and you're helping them with the kids, and you're cooking and you're talking and you're doing things in the background that is less obvious and seen, but just as impactful as going out and letting your voice actually be heard on the streets. And so, um, yeah, in that community care aspect that we were talking about with in solidarity with our intentions with the podcast, we wanted to kind of bring a more grounded self, or grounded, um kind of, how do I say this, self-care centered, without being too, of course, individualistic, because we are in this together, of course, but remembering that it starts from within. And on the topic of decolonizing, keeping in mind that it has been around, unfortunately, long enough to have some deep-seated unconscious, kind of routines in our lives that sometimes we have to keep in check of how are we thinking about approaching this matter, and is it um more culturally centric and resonant with our cultural values, or is this a more Western way of looking at it? Because sometimes, I admit too, sometimes I think about things in a way that's not in alignment with what I think our ancestors would have wanted us to be emanating today. And then I would have that reflection of taking a step back and looking at my mindset and how I'm thinking about this certain issue and what I think is acceptable to think about or talk about in a certain way. And a part of that is that colonial influence that we have to work on within our own communities in order to give each other that assurance of safety and security in our community that we need to thrive, to be able to show up and do the outside work that we do that matters just as much, to bring that balance. Yeah, I think that's very important. And my relationship to activism, specifically in this world, is in this realm on this island, has been mainly surrounding my artistry and my creativity in the way that I channel that. And I want to bring like a kind of creative, artistic perspective as a musician and a poet, um, to the movement, and like where are the spaces in the movement that we can fit in, and how is it that other people around the world and in the Marianas and our neighboring and my islands, what are the groups that we are reaching out to that are already also just like us doing the thing that looks a little bit different? It's not maybe the traditional protest that we've been taught is the only way, but I believe that there are, many truths that lead to one core um, movement, and that's our independence and right to self-determination. And at the root of that is just love. To be cliche, but really like the way that we would like to approach this in a more, I guess, grounded, culturally, spiritual, resonant way. Yeah, to add that.
I love that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, like that's why we do this work. We Gunaida, like, and when we go out at MCCA specifically, we do work with the youth around water testing and bioremediation. One of the first things that we ask is, what do you need to be a water protector? What do you need to be a land defender? Um, and they're like guessing, they're like, scientific background, they're like throwing out all these technical things that they think that you need to be a protector of your island, and at the end of the day you bring it back to them by saying, well, actually, like, all you really need is Wenaida. And so I don't think that's corny at all. I think that we need to bring it back to that. And maybe that's why this podcast and this conversation is important, because from a community perspective, when they look at organizing spaces and when they look at, activists, they just see people on the road holding signs. They don't see like the love that goes into it.
Yeah.
And the care, practicing care for each other. If we say, we believe in community care, if we say, one Marianas, what are we actually doing to practice that care? So, MCCA, specifically the org that I help organize with, is last year we made it mandatory to do a conflict mediation training. So every quarter we did a training, and for our whole staff, had a group come in and facilitate conflict mediation. And that just kind of showed us some of the tools that we might be able to use, because conflict will always arise, right? There's always going to be conflict. Is human nature, but to have the tools to navigate that, to address the conflict when it's at a low simmer versus raging fire, that's something that we feel is super, super important in our spaces, creating welcoming spaces, creating safe spaces. And so maybe, that's something, as we talk with other organizers, we're talking about from Luta for Luta, for example. We're talking about connecting with people in Mauna Kea, the Mauna Kea movement. There's also a friend of mine, Libre, who has been on a medical mission in Gaza for over a year now. When we connect with them, obviously getting the information out about what's happening in these places, but also, what are you doing to build up the community around you, so that what the work that you're doing is sustainable? Or what are you doing for yourself? What care are you practicing to make this activism sustainable? Because it's not for the weak. Like, you need to have a certain level of grit to continue on with work where you're highlighting violence to the land, violence to the waters. So yeah, how are you practicing care to make what you're doing generative and sustainable? I think is a conversation that we want to have with other orgs, not just in Guahan, but all around the world.
Oh my goodness, I'm getting very, very excited for this. And we do have a few questions that have come in, but for anyone else that has questions, put favor, Faisenhat. There was already a lot of points that you made that I was, you know, that we could build upon for this. I mean, I liked Maria, I really liked the way that you were talking about expanding the notion of activism, because, if and it's especially important nowadays because, if when you think about it, if the vision of an activist or the image of it is tied so much to kind of protesting or going out and protesting, which can be an important, demonstration, but the thing though is that it's something that can also be ignored or co-opted, or people can just, it can be kind of subsumed within the system, that in order to kind of, depending on the type of system that you are seeking to destabilize or replace, you need more than protesters. You need people that are building alternatives. You need people that are attacking or challenging the system in a variety of ways. And so just going out and holding a sign, you do need people that are willing to do that, but you need more than that. And so I like the way that kind of opening up the label of activist So, and sometimes you need, even if you do need those who are willing to block a road, those who are willing to jump a fence, those who are willing to do that, you need them. But you need people who are willing to do a lot more than that in order to really change an island, change a community, change a system. And so I like the way that you are bringing even, I mean, because when people talk to me about these sorts of issues, I say, you know what, when you look at how societies change and how communities change, it's hard to tell what helps them change, what helps ideas change. Because if you've ever talked to somebody about an issue, if you speak to them directly about it and get in their face, sometimes that doesn't help them change their mind. But if you can come at them in another way, sometimes that's what helps them make change their mind. If you can change the ground beneath them or the world around them, that's what'll get them to change. But if you talk to them directly, I mean, some of you, I got cousins like that. Your cousin could be dying from ancient Agent Blue contamination or something, and from Desert Storm. And they're like, no, Uncle Sam is perfect. Uncle Sam never did anything wrong. Agent Blue, I deserved it. We deserved it because without them, we'd be speaking Japanese or Korean or Chinese or whatever. I don't know. But my commissary privileges, I die. I die without them. I can't. We need them. Without America, we don't have no McDonald's or aircon. Or well, I'm not going to go talkie in the jungle. We need Uncle Sam. That's your cousin. And while your cousin is dying from inadequate VA care, all sorts of stuff is dying from Agent Blue poisoning, all of this stuff. But if you're trying to talk to them directly, no. But you never know what might convince somebody like that. It might be a song that makes them feel, or it might be something that inspires them as a Chamorro to feel pride, that makes them realize I'm not being treated right, or so these are the types of things why. So even when you talked about language, like one of the things that I find has really helped people become more open to these things is culture, language, identity. If you help people understand that your identity doesn't have to be tied to being a footnote of America, or you don't have to be like a base of America. That's it. Then it's easier for people to be open. And then Tahini, I really liked when you said, Hafana, you were just like thinking about what is Chamorro, and you're like, it's not just the ancient times. I like that too, because then when you do think about it, it's kind of hard as you're going about your day, like, what would my ancestors do? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. If I'm thinking about my ancestors 2,000 years ago, my ancestors 50 years ago, my ancestors 500 years ago. But it's good to have that perspective though, and to remember that. And for me, I think it's good to give yourself a tomorrow break sometimes. That there's a big spectrum of tomorrow possibility, and to do your best, and that you don't have to be perfect for your ancestors in the past. It's not like I bet, I'm sure that Haral would have liked spam. No, no, I'm kidding. No, no, no. No, no. Haral would have been like, we must get rid of them. Hey, Hafana, what is that? Hafesti? Naga, naga, wait, naga, let's hold off the fight. Naga zabetsagesti.
What about Finideni? You think they would have liked
Oh
Finideni?
man, see, no. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I think Haral would have tried it, and then he would have been like, oh, this is so good. Oh my, I just got gout. Shit, let's get rid of them. I just got gout. So,
Oh no,
but
mango beans, mama. Oh.
but no, for me, I like the way that you're grounding this in a way, because sometimes, unfortunately, activist conversations can be very exclusionary. Unfortunately, people can feel like you, and it's not unique. It's not unique to any community, but sometimes people can be very narrow and think you have to be like this, you have to believe this, you have to do this.
Mhm.
And sometimes groups may feel that because of what their mission is, what their is important to them. But I like your approach that, you know what, if we want to be in solidarity with others, if we want to hear other movements, we need to be as open as possible so we can hear and understand as much as possible. So let's be open. And so, man, but I really like, I really like that just because I really like this focus because for me, when we think about our local media here, but also when we think about our algorithms that give us our social media, I mean, it's hard to hear, it's hard to find news. Like I'm somebody who wants to know what's going on in other islands across the Pacific, and it's hard to find. It's hard for algorithms to give it to me. It's hard to find it in our local news, what's happening to the islands around us or other movements. And so that's why I'm really glad that you are thinking and being very intentional about connecting us to similar movements and similar communities. And
Thank
so,
you. Yeah, that was basically our intention behind the intention. So there's like sub-intentions, you know. It's very multi-layered, and me and Maria being friends for this long and having the hearts and the minds and the spirits that we have about these things, we pretty much agreed from the get-go, and I think that's why we've been friends for so long, and like this is still going, is because we're on that same wavelength of there's got to be more to it than just this. And, we can do this, but that's not all there is, as you said too, Miguel. And it's very, so, so true. Um, and growing up, being a little bit on the neurodivergent side, there is already that understanding of looking at something that I understand, but not quite know how to approach, because it's like, I understand this, but for me and my personality or my mentality and the way that my mind works, I see a different way that I could achieve the same kind of result, but without doing it this way that works for this person, or that way that works for that person. And me and my niche community that is not so niche when we reach out to other groups and people that are, you can see we're on the same boat in the same segment. And we are pretty much looking all together, looking for each other, looking for something that is different than, some of the noise that we hear, that we think and we're convinced, especially in the media and the algorithm pushes to us that this is the only way to do it and this is the only way that works. Um, and then other communities that are working in a equally impactful way, but it looks a little bit different. How are they doing that? And when you sit down and you talk with these people, and many times it's off camera, it's just at a kickback or it's on the phone with somebody like Maria's friend in Gaza or in near Mauna Kea, I think it is, in Hawaii. And you realize and you hear that they have stories just like us, where they saw what was and wasn't working in their islands, in their communities, in their countries, what wasn't working, and then kind of brought their own unique flavor, color, and taste to a new kind of approach that was a more, yeah, culturally centric way of approaching it, that they felt in their spirits to be just as, if not a little bit more efficient for like the new world that we want to build for our people going forward. Um, because we know what the fight looks like, but we don't know we have like an idea, a faint idea of what the world looks like without the fight. Like we are fighting to eventually not have to fight, right? And once we can say that, what does that world look like when we say we don't have to fight anymore? What are the communities looking like? What does our sustainability look like? Not just with food sovereignty and with our systems and political systems, but our spirituality, our the way that we commune, and why and where and how, and what do we normalize in that world that looks like. because it's so close, yet it can be a distant kind of vision if we are not doing what we're doing today as future ancestors of our descendants who will be able to reference like this is what they did and what we did are doing right now in this day and age to facilitate that new world, that better world for our children. So it looks like many different things. So thank you guys for bringing that up because I I identify with that. Like I've grown up and just like accidentally on purpose by tomorrow fate ending up in the courtroom just speaking in the same room not knowing Maria's family but just knowing I think before that in a form before that formal setting came I've always grown up having that heart and that passion for human beings in general and wanting to hear and listen to people and hear them share their stories and relate each other to each other and find that because it gets rid of that stigma that we have to do it alone and it's a dog eat dog world and you got to just suck it up and get on with the hustle and bustle of life that we see is very not sustainable and hasn't been for a while. um but yeah, what does that look like and what are people doing and what are we doing here on our island too that is already kind of facilitating that change in quieter ways but very impactful.
Absolutely. Like I could see these conversations being almost a strategy in and of themselves to figure out our way to this new reality of care of going back to um practicing more enough Malik with each other. um you know we could I mean I feel like we're in the last few minutes, but just thinking about it being part of our culture to practice that value of an FMALIC makes you see initiatives like economic cooperatives, for example, could be one episode where we look at tying that to our culture and the ways that we have always done things. So yeah, I could just see these conversations leading to more solutions. um, and at the end of the day, we want the viewers to be involved too. So, if those watching have ideas about how they would want to see the future and how they want to get involved, we'd love for you to share your thoughts on that. And in my experience, looking at ways in different programs and fellowships that I've been part of, ways that bring the community together, kind of narrowing it down from like 20 things to like 4 things as a cohort of land defenders from all over the world. Like, it kind of came down to like food, music, art, like these are the things that bring people together. And this is a strategy that we can take to inform and inspire. So we can't wait to hear what other groups are doing in Guahan, in the Marianas, all around the world. And we look forward to bringing this to you. If we end up really liking doing this, who knows, maybe we might do it a little bit more than quarterly. But yeah, we look forward to just hearing what people think about this concept. And we're just excited to bring this to life.
Biba. Oh, it is. I no, I it is so so necessary. I mean, what there was a we had a few questions and we're almost out of time though. And so we won't really I don't think we're going to have time to get to some of those questions. Some of the questions though you did address in some of your comments. Um but just to one of the questions though was just generally like what is the value of solidarity? Like why is solidarity important? And so I wanted to give as we're kind of closing out the episode, and it's okay, we can go past the 1 o'clock hour. But do either of you just want to share some thoughts on what is the value of solidarity? And because I have some thoughts too that I could share, but because I know that this is something that'll come up because for we're all many people, you think especially when we look at what's happening now, in the budget discussions here on island in the legislature, there was discussions about cutting and zeroing out everything related to Chamorro culture, everything related to the arts, everything related to the library, public television. And that's connected to the kind of consciousness, which also says like, well, why should we care what happens anywhere else in the world? We got to take care of ourselves. And so, do you have any kind of any thoughts about why is solidarity important?
You want to take that first, sis?
I was actually gonna ask you if you wanted to take Drunken Poe. I'm kidding. There's gonna be a lag and I can cheat. I'm kidding. Um, I think I can get this out and then you can share
It's
because I
okay because
really want to hear what you
because
have.
you'll have one episode every 3 months to also answer it. So don't worry,
Mm-hmm.
you're not stuck with whatever. But think of this as just kind of like your chesa. This is not even chesa.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this is just getting a cup of water for your grandma.
Just light refreshment.
Before the table's even opened, just say, "Hey, kumao how nana here estige honum." So yeah, it's just a start, just a start. But why is it important?
I think this is one of the things that I feel we might have answered the first half of in partial with our conversations of how me and Maria came to be, and the work that we're doing is so important. But we could not have met each other if we weren't in community in some way, shape, or form with the people around us that when we show up and we put ourselves out there and we just find ourselves networking organically. Um, and so like solidarity, that unity with each other can only be found when you show up. And when you show up and you find that solidarity, it makes you feel like, you know, what is the value of feeling less alone? Kind of is how I take this question. How can we feel we are a social species? Human beings are not designed to do this alone or feel like we're going through these very traumatic, worldly, catastrophic events alone either, whether it has nothing to do with us or everything to do with us. And, there's different types of wars and battles. Not everything is with guns and weapons. A lot of it is in our education, in our system, in our jobs, in our systems. And it's a more abstract kind of war and battle. But we can still relate how we deal with that by looking at another country or another place that's actually dealing with that outside of themselves. And how are they still holding that light in a very dark time? And so it's a very multifaceted question that I think obviously we cannot do it all in one. This is Chessa Table episode number one, but um we'll get to the red rice and the fried chicken in 3 months and we'll get to the desserts of this question. But I think it's very important because when we are alone and we experience these traumatic events on a worldly and individual scale, it makes us think, of course, what is the point? If we're by ourselves and we have to do this alone, there's no hope. And when you reach out and you find solidarity within groups or within music or arts or a practice carving, anything that is your channel and your medium to kind of express that, and you're around people naturally that inspire you to keep going. I think over time, when you show up, it's something that comes in experience too. That's not a meaning that we can define for you. Whoever asked the question of like, what is the meaning? It's very subjective. At the end of the day, the person who's showing up or not, what do they want it to mean? And what are they looking for when they show up? That means what they want solidarity to mean for them and the value in their specific life that can have, because we're all in different paths at the end of the day, but they're connected.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Eh,
That's my answer. Locking in.
Sidus Masi Zahui Finetanas Muchesa, Sidus Masi. All right. And Maria,
Ah,
thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say I think solidarity, why it makes sense to highlight this in our series is I believe solidarity is practicing care. You know, it's I think Heaney hit the nail on the head. Is that the nail thing that you're trying to write down? Around, you know, it just makes you feel less alone, right? There's so much happening, especially around indigenous communities around the world. So to get together and to be like, oh, that happened to you? Oh, that could happen here. You know, that's a cautionary tale for what could happen here. That's happening here. You don't want that to happen there. Um, and you know, just coming together in that way, uplifting petitions, showing other communities you care about them too. It just straight builds that strength together. So I hope that that's what we can achieve in this series.
Oh, Sidus Masi. No, Sidus Masi no Hamzuna dos. Yeah, I think solid. I liked you both of your answers, and I think it'll evolve as you talk to more people, and that's one of the things is it's one of the reasons why solidarity is important is because it's how you grow, right? You connect to others, you learn about others, and you grow in your own struggle. Your mind opens, your own consciousness evolves. If you kind of try to grow and gain strength by shutting people out and closing off the world, you never really grow. And so I think we gain much by being in solidarity and with others by learning what's happening. And sometimes it's harder though, right? Sometimes it's harder because then you have to also hear their stories, share in their struggles, feel their pain. But then you can also then, if you rise up together, the joy is doubled too. When other people are free, when you are free, you become free together. And so there's so much, there's so much potential there. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see these episodes that will be coming up on the horizon. And so Sidus Mase, Nuhamzanados, Maria, Teihini, thank you for taking up this task. In Solidarity will be a quarterly series for Fanatsu. So about every 3 months or so, you can expect an episode from these two. And then yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this. And I para ginengwahunay hugo fagredesi hamzu because as I said, from the earliest days of Manny Cruz running Fanatsu, even to then Lawrence Lazama taking over Fanatsu, then to me taking over Fanatsu, we always wanted to have a space for solidarity conversations. And so I love the direction that you're taking it and helping it evolve and grow. And so, si Zusmasi nu hamzu na dos pari Fanatun Midzu, Zapara hamzu ni umeekungog zan umeega, si Zusmasi ajos, este ki manali hit talu.